You're listening to the Apex Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello, fantasy football fanatics. Welcome to the second official Apex Fantasy Football Podcast. We've got an awesome show for you guys today, discussing second-year breakout wide receivers, what kind of player profiles we want to look for, certain statistics from their college career and rookie year, etc. These thresholds become very important when looking for breakout players. Whatever kind of league you play in, redraft, dynasty, this is really vital information you're really going to want to pay attention to. I'll have my two esteemed co-hosts, Mike Brody on Twitter at BrodyM, BraudEM, and Dalton Cates on Twitter at DaltonGuruFF. Dive into detail on that in a bit. We're also going to do another edition of Heads or Tails where Mike and Dalton debate Marquise Brown. And remember, they don't know if they're arguing for or against him until seconds before, so you're going to want to stick around for that. So why don't we jump right into the nitty-gritty of today's episode, and that is second-year breakout wide receivers. When we were first toying with the idea of doing a podcast, this was the subject. This was the episode we all felt most excited and knowledgeable about. This is very near and dear to our hearts, our precious second-year breakout wide receivers here on the Apex Fantasy Football Podcast. So, Mike, why exactly is understanding what to look for in second-year breakouts so crucial to success in your fantasy football league?
It's very difficult to predict a jump in market share or opportunity for NFL players. The one predictable and exploitable way that we can do that is year two wide receivers. The only group of wide receivers to see their fantasy scoring increase on average are those going from their rookie year into their second year. The only time to expect a positive change in target market share is between years 1 and 2. The same is true for raw targets. The younger the player is, the better we can expect them to do. Players who were 21-year-old rookies see an increase of more than 20 targets in year 2 on average, which amounts to a nearly 4% increase in market share. 22-year-old players also generally see a small increase in targets, but by the age of 23, the expected increase actually drops below 0. So we want to target these guys before they see a big increase in market share, especially if we think they're really good players in year 1. A lot of the research that I'm discussing now and will discuss was done by Blair Andrews and Sean Siegel at RotoViz. Definitely, if you haven't, take a look at their stuff, listen to their podcast. They're very knowledgeable when it comes to year 2 breakouts, and they've done a lot of unbelievable research on the topic. Now I'm going to provide you with some examples of these players. I talk about them broadly, but a lot of these guys we saw take over fantasy leagues just last year. Somebody like DJ Chark was going undrafted in 20-round leagues, and he ended up jumping from scoring an average of 2.8 PPR points as a rookie to 15.1 in year 2. And this isn't something that we've never seen before. Even somebody like Victor Cruz, who barely played as a rookie, played in 3 games, averaged 0 fantasy points per game, and jumped to 16 fantasy points per game in year 2. Michael Gallup just last year went from 16.1 to 15.2. Brandon Marshall in 2006 went from 4.3 PPR points as a rookie to 17.6 in year 2. One of the more famous ones, Josh Gordon, went from averaging 10 fantasy points per game as a rookie to 22.5 as a sophomore. So
what a magical year that was.
This jump is something that we've seen time and time again. I have plenty more examples. Even good high first-round picks like Larry Fitzgerald averaged a steady 11.6 as a rookie, jumped to 19.3 as a sophomore. So we know that these guys are going to be a lot more comfortable entering year 2. They're going to see more volume. Even if it's not a 10-point increase like some of these guys, Cortland Sutton just last year jumped from being a fringe guy who scored 8.5 fantasy points per game to a steady 13.9 as a sophomore. So this is something that we know is going to happen with young players and something that we should definitely be taking advantage of.
So kind of what Mike is saying to recap is basically that, an unbelievable statistic that I only recently learned about, that the only time you can really expect more opportunity for a wide receiver is that jump from year 1 to year 2. You'd think that maybe in year 4 they'd reach the height of their superstardom when they're getting 160 targets, but the jump from 3 to 4, 2 to 3 is not the big jump that we're looking for, right? So paying attention to these second-year wide receivers for opportunity alone is hugely important. Dalton, what else can you add to this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, second-year wide receivers are clearly the type of receivers we want to target, but there's also things that we should be looking for within those second-year wide receivers, and things that may be pointing us in a direction of a breakout, maybe an indication or things. So I'm going to go over a couple of things that I think can help us give better bets on who may be some of the guys or things to look for in the second-year wide receivers. One of the most important things that I know Blair Andrews has done a ton at RotoViz, and I've done a little bit of work with myself here at Apex, is how rookie efficiency, how important it is for second-year wide receivers. I found in my research that if a wide receiver has over 60 targets and they have over 8 yards per target in their rookie season, they have a much higher success of breaking out at some point in their career. And also, there's other things that we need to be looking at as well in terms of prospect things like weight, for example. If we specifically look at something like weight, and we throw that in there with draft capital as well, and we have a BMI over 27%, and BMI is body mass index, which essentially puts a player's height and their weight, combines it together, and gives a base metric on basically how sturdy they are in the league. And and if you have over 27 BMI and you've drafted in the top 100 picks, which Blair Andrews has shown that if you're drafted in the first 3 rounds, essentially you have a much higher chance of success. You add those two together, and you have a 41% chance of hitting a wide receiver 1 season if you're drafted in the top 3 rounds and have BMI over 27. So very strong cohort if you weigh a ton, which has a lot of success for these wide receivers, and as well as draft capital as well. And another interesting thing is Rich Rebar down at Sharp Football Analysis has done some really interesting work on early declares and how important that is for wide receivers. Just over the past 10 years, we look at wide receiver 1s, 19.42% of the early declares became a wide receiver 1, while only 2.3% of non-early declares became wide receiver 1s in their career. Now, if we add some draft capital to that and give it a little more context, because we did mention that top 100 draft picks do have much more success in the NFL. And if we accumulate that with early declares, we're still getting a 27% hit rate for wide receiver 1s, but we're still only getting just under a 7% hit rate for these non-early declares to hit wide receiver 1 seasons in the league. So it's very clear that if you're looking at these wide receivers heading into year 2, to add some extra bets, you want to be looking for wide receivers who were efficient in their rookie season, weighed a ton, or had a strong BMI and weighed at least 210 pounds. Also, we're drafted in the top 3 rounds and we're an early declare. And if they fit all of those and they check all those boxes, they're a very high probability. If they hit a few of those, and they're a strong probability as well. So those are the kind of guys we want to target.
So, we went over in our first podcast about how DJ Moore is one guy that checks all these boxes. And, just to reemphasize how important spotting these second-year breakouts are, it's an off the top of my head since 2012. Guys who finish in their top 12 at the wide receiver position in their second year include Julio Jones in 2012, of course, Josh Gordon, Alshon in 2013, Odell Beckham, Allen Robinson, Jarvis Landry in 2015, Tyreek Hill and Michael Thomas in 2017, Juju in 2018. All of these guys were not, and the only exception I think of is when the draft, how high Julio went in fantasy drafts his sophomore year kind of went crazy. But other than that, all of these guys were really major bargains, maybe with the exception of Michael Thomas, and really were league winners. So what we're telling you here is that spotting these league-winning breakouts is not a matter of randomness, right? There are boxes, there are thresholds, a checklist that we go over. Anything else to add as far as this to this checklist that's so important for these wide receivers to hit, Mike?
Yeah, we very much care about draft position. We very much care about breakout age. The age of your rookie season matters a lot. I looked at the breakouts over the last 20 years, since 2000. And what I found is the increase for 21-year-olds to 24-year-old rookies is about the same for breakouts. It's between 6.2 and 6.4, but 21-year-old rookies consistently have a higher ceiling and a higher floor. They average the most as rookies, and they average the most in their second year. The second best was 22-year-olds. So it kind of goes in order of age. Another interesting finding that I had doing a lot of this research is a lot of these guys had their best season in year 2. So we can expect a big jump, and frequently year 2 will be the best year of your career. That was true for Corin Robinson. That was true for Mike Wallace. That was true for many of the other guys on this list. I believe Michael Floyd fits in that category. Hakeem Nicks definitely does. So we can see a big jump. And if you're in a dynasty league, you're going to have to pay that price after, and the guy is going to be a lot more expensive. And you may have potentially missed his peak. So if we see some of those characteristics in terms of rookie year efficiency, maybe a high draft pick, even if you don't see the rookie year production for a guy like DJ Chark, who basically did nothing as a rookie, but he obviously had the speed indicator, he had some weight, he had some height, he was a high draft pick, and just knowing those things, we know that he's going to see a lot more of an opportunity in year 2, and maybe for that reason, he is a guy to target.
And so thinking about this in dynasty leagues as well, especially important, not just for you guys in redraft leagues, thinking about when a player's price is at their highest and you can acquire some of these players now. Maybe Terry McLaurin or Deebo Samuel seem like they have a high price now, but just wait until after the season, if it happens, of course, and you will wish you bought them before. So obviously, this is very important stuff as it pertains to the most important skill in fantasy, which is prognostication, indicating future success, right? Knowing just the past is only so helpful. How can we apply this knowledge to 2020? Mike, let's start with you on this one.
So I'm mainly going to talk about inexpensive guys like DJ Chark who can break out, but I do want to make one note on somebody like AJ Brown, who did have a really good rookie year. I think that people say based on the rookie year, he can't do better in year 2 in terms of efficiency, in terms of possibly volume, obviously, is a concern for Tennessee, but somebody like Juju, who had a really good rookie year at 14.1 fantasy points per game, jumped to 18.6 in year 2. So don't be too quick to close the door on good rookies. Obviously, it's more difficult for them to see a jump in production, but this is an exploitable thing that we see time and time again. And AJ Brown wasn't involved in the game planning as frequently for the Titans early in the year, and he's going to see a lot more opportunity and be a lot more comfortable in his role in year 2. I think he'll be ready to ball out. Now I'll be talking about guys who are a little bit cheaper, maybe in the DJ Chark role mold. And somebody like that is N'Keal Harry, who as a rookie, he didn't have a lot of production. He was obviously injured for most of the year, only played 7 games, didn't play fully in those games. He did score touchdowns at a high rate, but his efficiency metrics weren't good. He struggled to become involved in the Patriots offense. And I'm not sure that we should hold these things against him. This is a guy who broke out early in college, dominated in college, even with good teammates like Brandon Ayuk, who he outperformed. He was a first-round pick, so we know that the Patriots want to get him involved. He checks the weight, and he doesn't just check the weight box, but he has speed at that weight. So there are a lot of reasons to think that this guy could come in year 2, be a lot more comfortable, and maybe it's valuable to fantasy owners to just throw out what he did in year 1. It's not a big sample size. It's not enough information. And this guy was selected first in a class, or second behind Marquise Brown, in a class that had a lot of unbelievable rookies. So don't let that rookie year production get you too low on him. I believe the same is true for Paris Campbell, who is basically free in drafts. I'm not a huge Paris Campbell guy, but if you go back to college and you look at his production versus a Terry McLaurin, he was really productive. And he was a high pick for the Colts. And he, again, played the first year injured. Should we hold that against him? Now he's basically free in drafts. I see this as an opportunity. We know year 2 that this guy is going to potentially see a big leap in production. And for his cost, I definitely think he's worth a roll of the dice. So the two of them I wanted to talk about. I also want to touch on a guy like Preston Williams, who is really undervalued at this point. He did have the rookie year production. He saw more targets than Mike Gesicki, and Devontae Parker as a rookie was really good. He dominated in preseason, played really well, saw his breakout in the week that he happened to get injured. And while everybody's very excited about the DK Metcalfs and the Marquise Browns and the AJ Browns, and rightfully so, Preston Williams is a name that some recency bias is probably affecting. And this guy has performed whenever given the opportunity, and is another guy that was really good in year one, and we should expect to be even better in year two.
So Dalton, Micah apparently took your AJ Brown hype. I'm really apologize for that. He came to play today. What else can you add as far as year two breakouts for 2020 goes in terms of anything Mike didn't touch on? I know we do have to pay a bit of a high price for some of these guys, but as he pointed out, some of these guys are pretty much free in fantasy drafts right now.
Yeah, so you talked a lot about a lot of the free guys. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the guys who maybe are going a little higher, and people may be a little bit hesitant to draft because they're like, their price is in the fourth, fifth round range, where you are getting some of guys who have produced in the league before. But like Mike mentioned, these are guys that even though they did well in the rookie year, they can still see the extra jump from the second tier wide receiver 2 type player to that leap to the true breakout wide receiver 1s. We see it all the time with these wide receivers. But a couple guys who check some of the boxes that I talked about earlier. One guy that Mike touched on, or one interesting point, was the fact that 21-year-old players usually see the bigger jumps heading into the second year. And a guy who played his full entire season as a 21-year-old rookie was DK Metcalf. And DK Metcalf, not only was he an early declare, which we touched on, which was important, but he also was efficient as a rookie. And he also weighs over 225 pounds. So he checks all those boxes that we're looking for and really fits that prototypical mold of all the indicators that we're looking for in a breakout wide receiver. You pair him with the fact that he's with Russell Wilson right now as well. And there's reason to believe that even if he isn't getting the full volume of a true elite alpha of the 130 plus targets, he can still be very efficient in his role in that breakout. Another guy is Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, he has the draft capital getting in the top 3 rounds. Doesn't necessarily have the college profile that we like, but what we saw from him in the NFL was absolutely spectacular. He's another guy who checks that weight threshold, 210 pounds last year, and he was extremely efficient as a rookie. And Mike touched on AJ Brown a little bit. But I'm gonna touch on Deebo Samuel as well. This is also another guy who had the draft capital, was a 2nd round pick last year. He was very efficient, and he also weighs over 210 pounds. So if we look at some players who had over 80 targets their rookie year, meaning they got some volume as a rookie, and they were efficient, meaning they got over 8 yards per target as a rookie. And we look at guys who also weighed over 210 pounds. Is a pretty exclusive list there that included 15 players prior to the 2017 class, in which all 15 of those players to hit those marks had at least one season in the NFL with over 230 fantasy points. 14 of those 15 wide receivers had at least one wide receiver 1 season, and 10 of those 15 wide receivers had multiple wide receiver 1 seasons. So these are the perennial wide receivers. And some of the names that are on this list are Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas, AJ Green, Hopkins, Mike Evans, Mari Cooper, Andre Johnson, Calvin Johnson, and Bolt. So it's literally the best of the best that we've seen in the past couple of decades. And guys like AJ Brown, Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and DK Metcalf join that list, which is very impressive. And it puts them in a very strong cohort for future success. And guys who actually made it last year was the guy like DJ Moore and Cortland Sutton, who we saw have those 2nd year leaps. And a player who missed this by 1 target in his 2017 season was Juju Smith-Schuster, who we saw a massive leap for him in year 2 as well. So these are very, very strong cohort for these guys to be in, and what they did their rookie season, that we should be absolutely thrilled and understand that they're actually arguably of value at their current ADPs right now.
And I think it's important to note that kind of every year we're seeing these jumps. Just last year, DJ Chark jumped by 12.3 points per game, Michael Gallup by 9.1, Cortland Sutton by 5.4, and DJ Moore by 5.3. I don't know that there's any other position or age or anything that's as exploitable in fantasy that we can expect these guys to be better, and it's often not baked into their price.
And, if you just went off last year, if you went into last year saying, I'm only going to draft second-year wide receivers just as an experiment, and you ended up with, first of all, you weren't spending a top 3 round. Maybe you spent a 4th round pick on Calvin Ridley last year, but with guys like Ridley, DJ Moore, you were not spending a top 4 round pick. And Chark and Sutton was maybe an 8th rounder. Chark went undrafted. So you could have gone all running back and tight end last year, just gotten those second-year wide receivers, and you would have had, I believe, 4 top 24 wide receivers for a very, very discounted price. And Mike made a really important point with one of our favorite players here on the Apex Fantasy Football Podcast, AJ Brown, is that don't let rookie year success deter you, especially if you're drafting in a dynasty league, right? Like I mentioned earlier, their price will never be lower than it is right now for guys like Terry McLaurin or Deebo Samuel or DK Metcalf. Maybe a 4th round price tag for one of those guys seems high now in a dynasty startup, but just wait till next year when they're going in maybe the 2nd round and the 2nd round redraft leagues as well. And I remember going back in the last year thinking, the 2019 draft, right? This is an offensive and defensive line draft. We did not think that we would see this kind of success from these rookies at this time last year, but now they're kind of comparable with the legendary 2014 class with Odell, Cooks, Mike Evans, etc. So there is definite opportunity to be had. So just to give you guys a quick recap, there are these second-year breakouts are predictable, right? And there are certain boxes they need to check that make their breakout even more likely. These include what percent of their team's yards they had in college, how old they were when they started to really have college success, what year they were drafted in, how much they weigh, combine statistics, and rookie year statistics and efficiency, right? So these things, again, aren't random. Understanding these are key to prognosticating and understanding how you're going to win your fantasy league.
And don't write somebody off after an injury-plagued half of a season, especially as a rookie when we know it's hard to get acclimated to the NFL.
Especially when their price is pretty much free. In draft.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm still betting on N'Keal Harry being a special player because there's more years to prove that he is a special player than there are to prove that he's not.
In fantasy drafts, are you going to take your second quarterback, or in a 1-quarterback league, you're going to take a stab on a guy like N'Keal Harry? To me, the answer is an absolute no-brainer, right? These are small moves that could potentially be huge payoffs in the future. As you can see, we've done our homework. I'm going to link a lot of our own research as well as the great research of Sean Siegel and Blair Andrews and Rich Rebar into the show notes. I really recommend you give it a read. We have plenty of time for the fantasy football season, and this is all really, really good stuff. Speaking of fantasy football, just a quick reminder, if you're excited to draft in a fantasy league for money, like everyone is, we here at Apex are your one-stop shop for this. We do season-long leagues. We do dynasty leagues. We do Superflex dynasty leagues. We do Superflex season-long leagues. We do email drafts where you have 8 hours to make a pick. We do live drafts, which are 90 seconds to make a pick. We have live draft Superflex leagues, any combination. We have auction leagues as low as $75 a spot, as high as $1,000 with the best payouts on the web, especially including enhancements. To sign up, all you need to do is go to apexfantasyleagues.com. You will not regret it. Now, let's get into our second segment of Heads or Tails, where I'm going to flip a coin. And this episode, Dalton was going to guess if it's heads or tails. If Dalton guesses correctly, he will get to choose whether he argues for or against Marquise Brown. If he is wrong, Mike will get to choose whether he argues for or against him. So let me take out my iPhone and my coin flip app. Dalton, what's your call today?
Gotta be tails.
Tails never fails. Unfortunately, this time, tails did fail. Mike, would you like to argue for or against Marquise Brown?
I will argue for Marquise Brown.
Okay, that is actually unexpected knowing Mike. So, Mike, why should we be drafting Marquise Brown at his price this year?
I think his efficiency as a rookie in the league's best offense, arguably, is definitely something that's in his favor. I'm not sure that he needs to get 120 targets in order to have a big season. His ceiling may be limited by the offense and by the targets, but his touchdown rate can be so high because defenses are so worried about Lamar Jackson running that a simple play action has him going one-on-one with potential to score a touchdown on any play. And playing injured during his rookie year and still having the production that he had is something that I don't really want to fade or miss out on. He averaged 8.2 yards per target. He only played 14 games and he scored 7 touchdowns. So I love to buy him heading into year 2. And I think that he's ready to rock.
And I think some important note about Marquise Brown is that, first of all, we're not huge on the eye test, but I even though I'm a huge Titans fan, watching them beat the Ravens in the playoffs was awesome for me. But he really popped making. He made some catches in traffic against the Titans secondary that really wasn't there were no slouches last year. And he scared me every single time the Ravens snapped the ball. And let's not forget, this is a guy that, CeeDee Lamb went as one of the top wide receivers this year and was many people's favorite wide receiver. I know Josh Norris of RotoWorld, a great college football analyst, had him as a top 5 player overall. Marquise Brown was the alpha dog when CeeDee Lamb and Kyler Murray were both there. And I don't think we can forget that. Dalton, what are some reasons why maybe you are fading Marquise Brown at his current price?
I think one big thing for me would just be opportunity cost. Looking at some of the wide receivers going around him, you see a guy like Tyler Boyd, who we've seen have crazy amount of targets last year and the year prior. He was wildly efficient, finishing, as a wide receiver 14. So I think you're missing on a guy like that. You're also missing out on like Jarvis Landry, who we've seen just be wildly productive to his first 6 seasons in his career, and also Michael Gallup as well. They're all going within 5 picks of Marquise Brown. So to take Marquise Brown over those guys who we've seen already be productive, and they're all arguably in pass or more pass heavy offenses, maybe except for the Browns, but that is one reason. Another reason for me would be his weight. If we've seen how wide receiver 1 seasons have finished, only 26% of wide receiver 1 seasons have come from a wide receiver who has had under a 27 BMI. So there's reason to believe that his ceiling isn't necessarily capped as a wide receiver 1, but actually more of a wide receiver 2. And if you look at all wide receivers to weigh under 175 pounds since 2000, only one of those players has had a wide receiver 1 season, and that was Deshaun Jackson. Now, you can make the argument that Deshaun Jackson may be a closer comp to, or Marquise Brown would be a closer comp to Deshaun Jackson, maybe some of the other players on the list. But the proof's in the pudding, that the fact that weight matters, and if you're if you're that underweight, then your ceiling is likely capped, and you're probably looking at more of a wide receiver 2 cap ceiling at that point.
And he's coming off a Lisfranc injury from college, which can be scary. And it's kind of funny that we talked this whole podcast about 2nd-year wide receivers, and now this is the first time we're really mentioning him as a real difference maker. And I saw a tweet from Adam Levitan of Establish the Run this morning that since 2012, 0 players under 180 pounds have finished as a top 10 wide receiver since 2012. So he doesn't check all of those boxes as far as a breakout 2nd-year guy. But what we're betting on with a guy like Marquise Brown is, first of all, he's not priced like a DK Metcalf is this year, or Terry McLaurin is, where you got to take him in like the 4th round. But so the price is a little reduced there. And we're also betting on, this is the top wide receiver on the best offense in the league last year. And they added almost 0 target competition. So it's at his price, it might be worth the gamble. But he doesn't check all those boxes. So really another guy who I think is fascinating to debate. Mike, any last words on Marquise Brown?
I agree with the opportunity cost argument. I think that Boyd, Gallup, all those guys are great players around him. I want all the wide receivers on my team. And Marquise Brown is the one who's heading into year 2, who really could see a leap in production because of that. He also is going to be on a good team and played a lot of last year injured. So I do think that he could pop and look a lot better, a lot more Deshaun Jackson-ish in year 2. And it's fun to own guys on offenses that will be scoring a lot of points.
And maybe he actually might be a better pick in best ball leagues where you don't have to predict which weeks he's going to catch that 80-yard touchdown, you know? So that is all we have for you guys today on the Apex Fantasy Football Podcast. We would really appreciate a subscribe and a review. We welcome any feedback whatsoever. Today you got some AJ Brown love, which you'll get every episode from us. You got a Corden Robinson citation, which I don't think you're going to find anywhere else. So thank you so much for joining us, giving us some of your precious time in these, shall we say, strange COVID-ridden days of ours. Let's all hope there's a football season. And thank you for listening to the Apex Fantasy Football Podcast from all of us here.